a Nuzlocke, any Pokemon that faints is boxed forever, and I'm gonna try to beat Pokemon Scarlet, only allowed to catch one of each ground type available in the game. So let me know your favorite ground type down in the comments below while you leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel. And starting out our journey through the Paldea region, the first ground type I find is Paldean Wooper. And what have they done to my boy? You used to be such a cutie. Either way, Poison Point's pretty good, and with an attack boosting nature, I can't complain too much. I then head over to Inlet Grotto where I pick up a Diglett, which nature is just pure pain. But our early game catching spree doesn't stop there, since I can pick up a Phanpy outside of Cortando, and in a nearby cave you can amazingly find Gible that's actually below level 15. At this stage, it would be logical to face Katie to raise the level cap, but we've got such a great matchup versus Cloth that I might as well take it out first to get the speed boost. This being the ground type experience, I'm of course only allowed to terrestrialize into ground, and while that's a huge restriction for the run, in this case it just means we can two-shot Cloth without even activating its ability. Next, I do take on Katie, and while we don't have a great matchup versus bug types, we do have Phanpy, and Phanpy's known for one thing and one thing only. Be careful! The first fight in the game we really have to respect is the Grass-type gym battle versus Brassius. Not only are we weak to Grass types, but since we can only terrestrialize into ground types, we can't Terra to shed our weakness. So we're gonna have to figure out something else. The first turn we get put to sleep by Petalil, but a Chesto Berry wakes me up and I can set up the first layer of Toxic Spikes with Wooper. For whatever reason, Petalil doesn't try to put me asleep again and instead goes for a Mega Drain, allowing me to set up the second layer of Toxic Spikes. This followed by an incredibly unlucky critical hit. I'm only gonna get in one Poison Tail before I have to swap out. I send in Gible, who only takes neutral damage from a Mega Drain and can take out the Petalil the following turn with a Fire Fang. I'm not quite able to one-shot the Smoliv with a Fire Fang, so it does take me down to half with a Razor Leaf before I can take it out the next turn. This leaves Brassius with his final Pokemon and the real threat on his team, Sudowoodo, which at least gets poisoned on the switch, and I can go for Protect to get a little bit of extra damage. However, Gible would 100% go down to a Trailblaze at this amount of health, so I have to swap out, sending in my Diglett. Unfortunately, Diglett's defenses are terrible, and Sudowoodo immediately puts Diglett in the ground. Or, you know, like further into the ground. My Diglett died. It's very sad, okay? With only 3 Pokemon remaining, I send in Phanpy and immediately go for Protect to get a bit more poison damage. Sudowoodo then Trailblazes, taking me down into the red and further boosting its speed. I go for a Defense Curl here, but realistically, I should have probably just used an attacking move since there's no way we're going to be surviving the next hit no matter what. At this point, Poison is starting to do a lot of damage, and even though I can go for Protect the next turn, it isn't quite enough to take out the Sudowoodo. The Sudowoodo will go down the next turn, and I'm guaranteed to win the fight, but none of my Pokemon can take a hit, meaning I have to choose who to sacrifice. It isn't an easy choice, but ultimately Gible and having access to Toxic Spikes through Wooper means that I decide to sacrifice Phanpy. In a desperate attempt to hang on, I click Protect again, and I actually end up getting the double Protect. And I do love my Phanpy, so sometimes things just work out. Night, Shroomish. Wait, what are you? No. Now, if you thought Brassius was trouble, Giacomo, the first boss of Team Star, is a much bigger issue. So I begin my preparations by catching a Numel outside of his base, and then just a few moments later, right where I caught the Numel, I can pick up my next encounter, a Mudbray. And with the stamina ability instead of own tempo, this thing's actually a huge pickup. Giacomo is a massive threat at this stage in the game, and much like all the Team Star bosses, you pretty much have to handle the Starmobiles by either having a super effective move, resist all of their moves, or have a reliable way to set up. Normally, this isn't a huge problem since anything that evolves before level 20, like Lucario, Gallade, or Pawmot, would definitely deal with this thing very easily. But our team kinda sucks. So I've gotta work with what we've got, but because I got boosted defense, it goes for Metal Sound, allowing me to fire off a Rock Smash, which barely does anything since I'm intimidated, but at least I get a defense drop, which is huge. I then survive a Snarl the next turn since Mudbray's special defense is actually fairly decent, and use another Rock Smash, which gets yet another defense drop. My Mudbray's then slaughtered, and I don't feel too good about having lost 2 Pokemon already. So I send in my Phanpy, who seems to have to bail me out of all kinds of situations, and right away, it gets Metal Sounded as well. This at least lets me use a Charm, which will make the otherwise obnoxious Wicked Torque a little bit less threatening. I then send in Numel, who tanks a Charm fairly well, and for that reason has to take a Metal Sound the next turn. I take the opportunity to use a Bulldoze, which I don't expect to do a lot of damage, damage, but at least we can lower its massive speed before we swap out into Phanpy again. Snarl isn't doing too much, so the next turn after I terrestrialize, it goes from Metal Sound to lower my special defense again. And with terrestrialization, this bulldoze actually does about 15% and lowers the Starmobile's speed. Phanpy then just barely survives the next Snarl and manages to get back a little bit of health with an Oran Berry after I fire off another bulldoze, further lowering the Starmobile's speed. And being at such low health unfortunately means I have to swap out, and while Numel can tank a Swift, another Snarl is unfortunately enough to take it out, losing me my third Pokemon. Fortunately though, Gible is still at full health, and after getting hit by a Metal Sound, I can use a Bulldoze to take out half of the Starmobile's remaining health. And amazingly, after -3 speed, we still don't outspeed the Starmobile, but fortunately, Gible survives and takes it out the next turn with a Bulldoze, granting us our first Star Badge. This means we have to take on the Open Sky Titan at the same level cap. However, between Charm to lower attack, Defense Curl to boost our defense, and boost the power of Rollout, it's pretty much a piece of cake, especially the second phase where Arven's Knackley hard carries. I then have an incredibly close call with Nemona, but ultimately come out on top with Swords Dance Gible. And during that fight, Wooper got to level 20, evolving it into Clodsire. Literally a turd with a face, but it's a cute face. And upon reaching the level cap of 24, Gible evolves into Gabite. Then, since our next challenge is here in Levincia, I decide to go to the beach and pick up a Sandygast. Dude, this is like one of the only Pokemon I have with the ground Terra type, which isn't making things easier. Our next opponent is then the current Miss Paldea, Iono.
Alrighty then, who's ready to see some butt?
Excuse me, what?
Looks like you're getting all hyped. Thank you muchly, Electric King.
Okay, I never agreed to take part in this type of stream. Iono having electric types is theoretically gonna make this a piece of cake, but that Miss Magius with Levitate she's got in the back is still a threat. So I begin my strategy by annihilating both Wattrel and Bellibolt with Clodsire. She then sends in her second to last Pokemon Luxio, and the only move this thing can use against my team is Bite, so I go ahead and send in my high defense Phanpy. The plan here is to go for Charm, but I flinch not once, but twice, which means poor Phanpy has taken 4 bites before I even get to Charm. But then I get crit, so I guess the luck I had against Sudowoodo is balancing out. However, despite getting super unlucky with 2 flinches and a crit, I still can follow through with my plan and set up 3 Swords Dances with my Gabite. From there, all it takes is 1 Bulldoze to send that stupid cat into the past. Which leaves Iono with her pesky Miss Magius, which is definitely gonna go for Confuse Ray since it won't take us out with a single Hex, and with +6 attack, I could potentially hit myself for some major damage. But of course, I've got a Person Berry to heal that confusion off and take the Miss Magius out with a +6 crunch.
You've just defeated the gym leader, yes?
Sure, I'll be the next Miss Paldea. The next couple badges were a breeze for my ground types. After picking up Rain Dance, Gabite eviscerated Mela. As for Earthworm, even though it's got ground immunity with Earth Eater, it really doesn't have any good attacking moves, so Gabite destroys it as well. Since we've got the problematic Water Gym to deal with next, I make sure to pick up a Barboach, and more importantly, under this great big tree, I pick up a Toedscool. Okay, who signed off on this idea? What the f? And luckily, at our level cap at 30, it evolves into Toedscool. And it comes at the exact right time when we're about to take on the Water-type gym leader, Kofu. And even though this is one of the worst matchups we've got in the game, I managed to make a huge mistake right off the bat, setting up grassy terrain, which doesn't even power up grass-type moves, but at least it might let us survive a Pluck the next turn. However, we were only slower because of Toedscool's ability and can in fact outspeed Veluza and gain most of our health back with a Giga Drain. From there, a second Giga Drain is enough to take out Veluza, and with the grassy terrain, we actually almost get back to full health. Next is Wugtrio, which does manage to flinch me at first with a Headbutt, however, we can easily gain that health back and more when I one-shot it with a Giga Drain. We then face Crabominable, and I at least thought I was going to be doing half with Giga Drain, but I'm just barely missing the mark. Crabominable then does way more than I expected with a Crab Hammer, so I fire off the next Giga Drain, and to my surprise, it actually takes it out since it was a critical hit, which I definitely won't complain about. I was then just about to miss it since they look so similar in the light, but is that a shiny? It is. Oh, he's such a cutie. Then after picking up the ultimate ground type move, Earthquake, I've got to take on Atticus, and with our now evolved Whiscash, all I've got to do is set up a few Dragon Dances while Skuntank tries to Sucker Punch, and it's game over. over from there. I then head over to the Asado Desert where I catch myself a Sandile. Very unfortunate it's Terra Dark, but I do prefer Moxie to the alternative Intimidate. Then after evolving it, which I think put the game camera inside of a wall, we've got to take on the normalest man of all normal men out there, Larry. And the strategy was simple. After Kamala runs out of Sucker Punch, all it can hit Sandygast with is Yawn, so I go for a bunch of sand attacks to lower its accuracy. This will be extra effective since the only attacking move Kamala has left is Slam, which already has terrible accuracy. This means with leftovers and a little bit of luck, I'll easily just be able to set up to +6 with Dragon Dance and proceed to take out all of Larry's Pokemon. There's only one little issue. Immediately after the gym fight, you've got to take on Nimona, and I thought I came prepared for this, but I wasn't as prepared as I should have been. On paper, this fight versus Nimona should be pretty straightforward. We do lead with Sandygast since we did versus Larry, and after a quick switch to Whiscash, I can take care of her Pokemon until we get to Pawmot and start setting up Dragon Dances. Once I take out the Pawmot, she'll only have Meowscarada left, and I'll definitely outspeed at +6, and at +6 attack, I should have enough raw power to take it out in one Zen Headbutt, or at least so I thought. Things really aren't looking good here. She can probably one-shot every one of my Pokemon with Flower Trick, but fortunately Clodsire manages to tough it out on 1 HP and can finish off the fight with a Poison Jab. That could have been bad. With another one of my team members lost, I prepare for the next gym by evolving Krokorok into Crocodile. And unfortunately my Crocodile has the Dark Terra type, so we're going to need a Pokemon to go with it that can Terrastalize into Ground so that we can maximize the efficiency of this gym. Luckily, Toedscruel does have Terra Ground, so we can capitalize on the boost we'll get at the end of the first turn if we Terrastalize. After Toedscruel protects, the Mimikyu does hit me with a Slash, and a single Crunch from Crocodile is enough to take out Banette and grant us that boost at the end of the turn to all of our stats. The next turn, with my newfound speed, I go for Crunch to take out the Mimikyu's Disguise, after which it just goes for a Slash again. It ends up getting a critical hit on Toedscruel and actually doing some decent damage, and a Play Rough from Houndstone does hurt. Mycelium Mite then makes Toedscruel go last at the end of the turn to put Houndstone to sleep. The next turn, I accidentally misclick. I was gonna Hex the Houndstone, but I end up hitting Mimikyu and just taking it out with both of my moves, which doesn't matter too much since the Houndstone just stays asleep. Rhyme then sends in her Toxtricity, but at this point, my Pokemon are boosted into the stratosphere, and a Hex is definitely enough to take out the sleeping Houndstone, followed by an incredibly strong Stab Super Effective Power Trip, definitely enough to take out the Toxtricity and grant us the Gym Badge. And after the fight, Sandygast even evolves to Palisand. What time is it now? Time for me to completely forget that we have to fight Nimona again. Oh no. This unfortunately means I didn't have nearly the appropriate movesets I should have or the appropriate items whatsoever. And with no moves to set up with, I proceeded to just take out all of Nimona's Pokemon before she sends in Meowscarada. Problem. A much bigger problem than last time since we now don't have Whiscash to deal a lot of damage, and unfortunately, Palisand immediately gets taken out. I really don't have a lot of options here. Most, if not all of my Pokemon are gonna get outsped and one-shot by Flower Trick. So I send in Clodsire to at least tank it neutrally, and to my surprise, it survives on 22 HP, able to fire back with a Toxic. A quick attack is then enough to take me out, but once again, Clodsire clutches out, surviving on 1 HP and able to fire off a Poison Jab. The poison at the end of the turn, however, isn't quite enough to take Meowscarada out, so the next turn, it's lights out for Clodsire. But with that toxic damage at the end, we are at least able to seize the win, only losing 2 Pokemon, which fortunately aren't going to be necessary whatsoever as we face Tulip, since our Dark-type Crocodile is all we need. Equipped with the Choice Scarf, it'll outspeed anything on our team, and while we can't one-shot the Farigiraf after a Moxie boost, the rest of her team simply doesn't stand a chance. I then head to the beach to pick up a Shellos, which I can of course immediately evolve into Gastrodon. This thing is going to come in massively handy since we next have to take on the Great Tusk. But with Gastro, the fight is a complete wash. And this means we actually get to challenge the Great Tusk. No, not you, Donphan. We get to challenge and capture Great Tusk, which of course doesn't have a ground terror type. I cannot catch a break. However, defeating the Titan means that our new level cap is at 48, which in turn means that Gabite can finally evolve into Garchomp, making it time to take on the final gym leader, Grusha, and his Ice types. Ice is one of our worst matchups, and worst of all for Garchomp, who ironically is gonna be the one to start us off, taking out the Frostmoth off with a quad effective Fire Fang. Beartech is next, which we're not going to be able to one-hit KO with a Fire Fang, so I swap out into Great Tusk, which with its massive 131 base defense can easily tank an Icicle Crash and gain an attack boost from a held Snowball. And since Great Tusk is actually pretty fast, we can easily outspeed the rest of Grush's team, taking them out with Brick Breaks. With all the 8 gym badges collected, we do still have a few fights we need to take on before we can challenge the Elite Four, and first of those is Ortega of Team Star. However, out of all the Team Star members, Ortega is one of the most manageable since we're beginning to catch up to the Starmobiles in stats, and unlike Ares, Ortega's Starmobile doesn't have one of the most busted setup moves in the entire game. And what I end up doing is teaching Crocodile Gunk Shot to easily take out his first 3 Pokemon and only collecting 2 Moxie Boosts because of the stupid way the Starmobile works, since no end of turn effects happen right before it comes out. Unfortunately, things go wrong when I miss my last Gunk Shot, so I'm forced to swap out into Gastrodon. This definitely isn't my plan A, however, Gastrodon does have pretty decent physical bulk, and with some leftovers paired with the fact that I have Recover, I start dealing as much damage as I can and end up getting a few accuracy drops with Muddy Water. And while I thought we were actually going to be losing Gastrodon for good in this fight, it ends up avoiding enough attacks and healing enough health with Recover to the point where I just take it out. Ares coming up, and we don't even have a full team, which definitely needs to change, so I go ahead and catch a Hippowdon. Finally, something with a guaranteed ground Terra. Aw, you've got such a cute little tail. What do you use that thing for, bud? Holy shit! The final member of Team Star we have to face is Aerie, and her team full of fighting types is no joke. So to make things a bit easier for myself, I send in Crocodile first, which can easily one-shot the Toxicroak with an Earthquake. However, even after a Moxie boost, Crocodile doesn't have enough power to take out Passimian in one hit, so I swap out into Gastrodon to tank a close combat. It does a lot more damage than I was hoping it would, but at least we can now switch out into Garchomp to tank another close combat. And the only reason it's beneficial for us to take all that damage is now Passimian has 2 defense drops, allowing us to take it out with an Earthquake. Annihilate, however, is a much bigger problem than the previous 2, having Ice Punch. It doesn't do a lot of damage to Gastrodon, however, the next turn, a close combat seals the deal, unfortunately taking out our lovable Slug. I then send in our newly acquired Hippowdon to set up the Sandstream, and with its intense bulk, close combat doesn't even do half damage, and even with Annihilate's defense lowered, an Earthquake doesn't even do enough to take it out, not even with the Sandstorm. So unfortunately, I've got to endure another close combat before I can take it out the next turn. Her second to last Pokemon is Lucario, which can easily take us out at this range, so I swap into Toedscruel, which has the best special defense on our team and can outspeed Lucario the next turn, taking it out with a single Earth Power. Which means we're down to the main attraction, the Calf Starmobile. So I swap out of Toedscruel into Hippowdon, which actually tanks a combat torque at that low health. Oh no. The reason this Starmobile is so dangerous is specifically Shift Gear, raising its attack and speed. On top of that, after I do some pathetic damage, it gets its defense boosted by Stamina, so I decided to Terrastalize to see if I can do a bit more damage, but I of course just get taken out by a combat torque. So much for Hippo. My next move is sending in Great Tusk, and with its massive defense, the Starmobile decides to set up more with Shift Gear. So I go for an Earthquake, which is getting me massively diminishing returns because of Stamina. The Starmobile then sets up 2 more times with Shift Gear, allowing me to get a bit more damage before it starts attacking. Going for a combat torque, our defense is still really good, and I survive just below half, allowing me 1 more Earthquake. That's unfortunately all she wrote, however, as Great Tusk gets completely annihilated the next turn by a combat torque. And the half of my team that's still alive isn't set up too well to deal with max attack, max defense, and max speed, so I just decide to send in Fungi. Yeah, we've just lost at this point, it's over. Wait a minute, what? That's right, from an unwinnable position, Toedscruel manages to tough it out through the power of friendship and retaliate back with a special attack to ultimately win us the fight. Oh, I forgot I had Life Orb. At this point, since our Fainted box is so full, we're down to only 2 Pokemon, so we're gonna need to find some new encounters. And unfortunately, we've almost burned through every single ground type in the game, but at least we can pick up a silly Cobra. I then head back to the Orthworm area to pick up the final ground type we can get in the game, Larvitar. And since it loses its ground typing upon evolving into Tyranitar, we're unfortunately stuck with Pupitar. I then evolve my Silicobra into Sandaconda before it's time to face the final Titan. And because Dondozo's a water water type, I'd forgive you for thinking that this is a difficult fight at all. But we've got Garchomp, and in the first phase, Dondozo doesn't even have the dragon type move order up, so we can very easily just take it out with a few Swords Dance boosted earthquakes. During the second phase, it does have order up to hit us super effectively, so I run around Casseroya Lake a little bit before the fight to pick up a Haban Berry so that we can't get O-Code. However, the Dondozo really seems to favor hitting Greedent, so it's very easy to take out the second phase as well. There's then just one final phase to take care of, Tatsugiri, which does have Icy Wind, so I decide to swap out immediately into my Crocodile holding a Yache Berry. But the first turn, Tatsugiri just goes for Taunt, and the second one, I even managed to avoid the Icy Wind. So after another takedown from Greedent, a second Dragon Claw seals the deal, beating the final Titan. I can't exactly say it's been easy to get this far, since we only have 4 Pokemon to enter the Elite Four. The first of which being Sandaconda with Earthquake, Thunderfang, Coil, and Glare. Then Pupitar with Earthquake, Crunch, Brick Break, and Dragon Dance. Moxie Crocodile with Earthquake, Crunch, Close Combat, and Bulk Up. Garchomp with Earthquake, Crunch, Fire Fang, and Swords Dance. And so, without having to put too much thought into which Pokemon we should bring to the Elite Four, we go up against the first Elite Four member, Rika. I begin by sending in Garchomp and immediately set up a Swords Dance to boost my attack. This Whiscash does problematically have Blizzard, but we can get around that by equipping Garchomp with a Yache Berry so it doesn't do too much damage. From there, Whiscash is dealt with by an Earthquake, and Rika sends in her second Pokemon, Donphan. This thing is a bit of a nuisance with its sturdy ability, however we do have enough health to survive even a critical hit Earthquake. However, if she crit, Dugtrio would have seen the KO with a Sucker Punch, so very fortunately that didn't happen, and we can very easily take out the Dugtrio after it sets up a Sandstorm. I mean, hey, that's just powering me up with Sandveil. From there, there's no risk involved, and we can take out the Camerupt and the Clodsire with a single +2 Earthquake each. Poppy is next, the Master of Steel types, which we of course have an excellent matchup against. I begin by sending in Sandaconda, whose mission is to set up the Stealth Rocks to better be able to deal with Magnezone's Sturdy. I then get hit by a Heavy Slam from Caparajah, which doesn't even do half, and sets up our Sandstorm through Sand Pit. This gives me a bit of extra evasion as I send in Garchomp, and the Caparajah just sets up the Stealth Rocks. I then go ahead and boost my attack with Swords Dance as Caparajah hits me with a super effective Play Rough that does way over half. This forces me to take out the Caparajah with an Earthquake the next turn, however at this point we're already in our winning position, able to take out our entire team with strategically placed Fire Fangs, Crunches, and Earthquakes. Gym Leader Larry has taken to the skies with flying types, which we can't actually hit with our ground types, and that's a bit of a problem. However, it's not too big a threat since flying doesn't hit ground super effectively, so the first turn I go for a Swords Dance to boost my attack as Tropia sets up the Sun with Sunny Day. This means it's faster the next turn with Chlorophyll, but with its terrible stats, it barely does anything with Solar Beam, which means it doesn't even matter that I miss my Fire Fang and have to take another one before I'm able to take it out. I gotta thank you for setting up the Sun for me there, buddy. And after that, Larry's gonna be praying that they remove Rock Slide from Garchomp's Learn Set the next generation because he gets absolutely destroyed by it. Meaning we've fairly effortlessly made it to the final Elite Four member, the Dragon Master Hassel. His Noivern's a lot faster than Garchomp, so I send in Assault Vest Crocodile, and its best move is to go for Super Fang to take out half of my health. A Dragon Claw doesn't quite do the job, and after it misses a second Super Fang, which wasn't a threat in the first place, I can take it out with a second Dragon Claw. This baits in the Dragalge, which is gonna go for its highest damage move, Hydro Pump, so I can swap in Garchomp, who can tank it neutrally because of its Dragon typing, and then set up a Swords Dance the next turn. This does expose me to Dragon Pulse, but with that Haban Berry I never used up versus Dondozo, we can easily tank it and then take out the Dragalge the next turn with a Dragon Claw. This does very unfortunately result in Garchomp getting poisoned by Poison Point. This does put me in a perilous position, since if we don't have enough health to take out Baxcalibur or Haxorus, things could be pretty bad. However, since regular poison doesn't do exponentially more damage, we do have enough health to survive after the Haxorus, and since end of turn effects don't activate the final turn of a fight, we can easily take out the Baxcalibur with a +2 Dragon Claw and not suffer the poison consequences. And thusly, we've made it all the way through the Elite Four without losing a single one of our Elite Four team members, putting us in the perfect position to take on Champion Gita. Her team is one of the most diverse in the entire game, and she's got a lot of good options to handle our ground types, so we need to execute this carefully. I start by sending in Expert Belt Crocodile, who does dodge the Dazzling Gleam. However, we would be able to tank it and can one-shot the Espathra to get ourselves a Moxie boost. This will then bait Geeta to send in Go-Goat as her second Pokemon. And because of that attack boost we got from Moxie, even through Go-Goat's really good defenses, a single Gunk Shot is enough to take it out in one shot. All we have to do was hit it. Geeta then sends in Veluza, and even if that Dazzling Gleam from Espathra would have hit us, we wouldn't have been in range of Aqua Jet here, so it's a free KO with Crunch as well. We've then got to deal with Avalug's massive defense. However, with +3, Close Combat's insane power, and an Expert Belt, we have just enough power to one-shot it. As for Kingambit, this thing is incredibly slow with a 50 base speed and quad weak to Close Combat, plus we're at +4 at this point, so it's incredibly easy to deal with. The drawbacks is that the close combats lower our special defense, and since we can't even outspeed this Glamora, we've gotta swap out into Pupitar holding a Focus Sash. I only make this pivot so that Garchomp won't have to swap in on a Dazzling Gleam and can tank the Earth Power with an Assault Vest. Garchomp then has the speed necessary to outspeed and the attack to one-shot the Glamora with an Earthquake. And with that sweet victory and the way we handled the Elite Four, I was feeling pretty confident. But we still have some of the game's most difficult fights left to do, and we only have these 4 Pokemon to tackle them with. And the first of these I decide to take on is arguably the easiest versus Arven. This man's been incredibly helpful in dealing with the Titans, but at this point he's gotta be dealt with. So I begin by sending in Crocodile against Greedent and setting up my attack and defense with a Bulk Up as it just hits me with a soft Body Slam. From there, I set up a Substitute and continue to set up with Bulk Ups to +6 attack and defense. From there, I knock out the Greedent, making sure that my Substitute is still intact. This is really important, since the only Pokemon on Arven's team that actually outspeeds Crocodile is Toedscruel. So all we've got to do is make sure the Toedscruel attacks our Substitute and then handle it swiftly with a +6 close combat. And the Toedscruel is really the only challenging element of the fight, since as stated before, we outspeed every single one of Arven's other Pokemon, and with +6 attack, it's a piece of cake to finish off the Path of Legends. Then before I try to finish off the Team Star storyline, I decide to take on Nemona. And this girl has been a constant headache throughout the run, and her final team is the most formidable yet. So as she starts by setting up Stealth Rocks with Lycanroc, I immediately take it out shortly after with an Earthquake. This means Goodra comes in next, but with its weak defense compared to its special defense, we can easily knock it out with a super effective Dragon Claw. Palmont, on the other hand, is faster and a big problem because of Ice Punch. However, with a Yache Berry to lower the damage, we can easily tank it, taking it out right afterwards with another Earthquake. From there, Nemona sends in to Dunsparce, and at this point, if I just continue taking out her Pokemon, she's just gonna sweep me with Meowscarada. So we're gonna need to do something about that because we really don't have more space in our Fainted box. My first order of business is to start setting up Bulk Ups to boost my attack and defense so that we take less damage from the Dunsparce while we boost our attack, but it just starts going for Coil. So we end up having a bit of a Cold War as we both just set up our stats with Bulk Up and Coil respectively. Once I'm satisfied with my boosts, I decide to go for a Substitute as the Dunsparce goes for another Coil. I then decide to Strike, however, because the Dunsparce has boosted its defense too, an Earthquake isn't quite enough to take it out, but a second one seals the deal. We then have to deal with Orthworm, which has the Earth Eater ability, so Earthquake won't do the trick, but luckily we've got Close Combat to finish it off. This puts me in an optimal position to face off against her final Pokemon, Meowscarada, which will outspeed and take out my Substitute, but that way I won't take any damage myself. I get to keep Crocodile and finish off Meowscarada with a single Close Combat. And thus, I finally get my revenge on Nemona and complete the Victory Road Saga. Awkwardly, however, beating Nemona does put us inside of Naranja Academy, and as soon as we exit, we trigger the fight versus Director Clavel. Luckily, I knew this would happen beforehand, and I came prepared. The one detail that had me a bit worried, however, is the rain. The first turn, I begin by setting up a Swords Dance with Garchomp to boost my attack once again as the Oranguru goes for a Yawn. Knowing it would do this, I can easily just take it out the next turn with a Crunch, which does mean we're gonna be put to sleep at the end of the turn here, but with a Chesto Berry, I can wake up and it's as if we got a free +2 attack. Well, at the cost of our item slot, but it's a pretty fair trade-off if you ask me. Abomasnow is next, and it actually fails to set up the snow because even though it doesn't look it, it says the rain is still up in the active battle battle status. Not sure what to make of it, I use a Fire Fang, which ends up being enough to take out the Abomasnow regardless. After that, Garchomp just has the moveset to take care of all of Clavel's Pokemon, making this an easy victory. This leaves us with Penny to complete the Team Star saga. However, this one isn't really much to speak of, since even though her evolutions can lower Garchomp's attack with Baby Doll Eyes, if I set up enough Swords Dances, I'll still just be ahead and able to take out all of her pesky dogs and cats. Which means we can finally head on towards Area 0. Wait a minute, is that a shiny Glamora? Did I just find a second shiny in one? Yep, I certainly did. I guess this means I can flex on Geeta even more now that she's not the top dog. No, we've got way bigger fish to fry than Geeta, since Professor Sada is actually an evil AI trying to take over the world. So with my measly 4 Pokemon, I'm gonna have to see what I can do. We've managed to make it almost all the way to the end, with only one more fight standing in our way of victory. Most of Sada's Pokemon have great coverage for ground, so we're gonna need a great strategy if we're gonna have any semblance of a chance to pull this off. I lead with Sandaconda, who immediately gets hit by a lunge, which has its attack lowered, but I can boost that up and my defense and accuracy by going for Coil. This paired with the leftovers at the end of the turn is gonna give me a lot more survivability. Slitherwing then hits a second lunge, this time doing a lot less damage as I continue to Coil up to boost my defense. Finally, Slitherwing mixes it up and goes for a Leech Life to try and recover back that little bit of chip we've done with the Sandstorm, as I go for a Glare to paralyze it to potentially get some free turns. I then continue setting up coils to +6 and throw out my Stealth Rocks. With all that defense, Slitherwing basically can't touch me, and I go for a Fire Fang, taking it out in one hit. And since it's got Ice Punch, I know that Screamtail's coming out next. This'll barely do any damage, however, between our boosted defense and Screamtail's terrible physical attack. I'm then not quite able to take out the bulky Screamtail with a single Fire Fang, so a second one does the job. In comes the ugliest Paradox Pokemon of them all, Brute Bonnet, which hits me with a Giga Drain, not even enough to take Sandaconda out. Which gives me a chance to retaliate back with a Fire Fang, not quite able to take out Brute Bonnet either, but I do manage to land a Burn. And together with Sandstorm, the Burn unfortunately isn't quite enough to take Brute Bonnet out. So I get completely destroyed by another Giga Drain the next turn. This does mean we lose Sandaconda, but taking out the Brute Bonnet with the Burn is way more than I expected of you, buddy. Which means it's time to move on to Phase 2 of the fight. I send in Crocodile as Professor Sada sends in her Flutter Mane. And with an Assault Vest, Mystical Fire barely does any damage, allowing me to use an Earthquake to one-shot the Flutter Mane and get myself a Moxie boost. With 2 Pokemon left, she first sends in Sandy Shocks, which I can outspeed and immediately get rid of with another Earthquake. This just leaves Sada with the big bad Roaring Moon, which even gets its attack boosted through Protosynthesis. This does mean the Crocodile's bulk will be enough to handle a Dragon Claw, but not in case we're unlucky enough to get struck by a critical hit. However, if that were to happen, we do still have Scarf Garchomp in the back, which would be able to clean up. And so, with that final close combat, I take out the Roaring Moon, and that, ladies and gentlemen, is how I beat a hardcore Nuzlocke of Pokemon Scarlet using only ground types. Heck, since it's over and Pupitar survived, I even gave it the courtesy of allowing it to evolve. It was a difficult run through and through, but Pokemon like Garchomp and Crocodile never failed to deliver. So ladies and gentlemen, if you made it this far into the video and you didn't leave a like and subscribe to the channel, I'm gonna have to send a Powdon after you.